I'm Tiffany. Welcome to Towering TBR. June was Pride Month, and I decided I was going to read books that were either by or about queer people. I read 10 things, and let's just get into it. I read Kim Reaper by Sarah Grayley. This was a really fun comic about Becca, and she has a crush on Kim. And she decides to follow her one day to ask her out, but she sees Kim disappearing through a wormhole. And what she finds out is that Kim is actually a Grim Reaper part-time. So she shows up at a house that has like a ton of cats. And so we're probably thinking like, oh, the person who lives here is probably like a crazy old cat lady. But no, it's this super buff dude who just really loves cats. Kim has come to reap the soul of one of the cats, but the buff dude is like, no, he's fine. He and I eat the same diet, and we're both fine. Which really reminded me of Idiocracy, where Brawndo with electrolytes is good for people, so it must be good for crops.
Brondo's got what plants crave.
It's got electrolytes.
Like, that's what I was thinking when he's like, we eat the same diet. So that scene really had me laughing out loud. And you kind of get to see Kim and Becca as this relationship starts. I thought it was really cute, and I liked it, and I gave it 3.5 stars. I found out there was a sequel, Kim Reaper Vampire Island, where we get to learn more about Kim and Becca's relationship and some of the adventures they go on. Becca is hanging out with her best friend Tyler, and they're watching Teen Vampire Show, which was just so cute. And Kim comes by to take Becca out on a date and sees that they're watching this vampire show and offers to take them to meet real vampires on Vampire Island. However, as soon as they get there, Kim is called in by her boss to come reap souls. Something happened in the first book that made Kim get in some trouble. And so he's making her work a lot of hours and is interrupting her time hanging out with Becca. So as soon as she gets to the party, she has to leave. And she's like, just so you know, don't let them know you're mortal. Pretend you're a vampire too, because they don't like outsiders. Unfortunately, Tyler hurts himself accidentally and starts bleeding, and it becomes very apparent that they are not undead. So they hatch a scheme to get out of it, and Tyler's all so grumpy about it. He says, like, fine, I'll do it, but I'm going to complain about it, which totally reminded me of a Bob's Burgers episode. I'll put the meme in. But, this was really good, and I really enjoyed seeing their relationship progress. And we learned a little bit about how Kim became a Grim Reaper. Unfortunately, because her boss was kind of working her a lot of hours, we don't really get to see Kim and Becca's relationship progress a whole lot. So if there's going to be another one, I hope that they focus on that a bit more, although I don't know if there is anymore. I gave the second one 3 stars. The last book that was a graphic novel I read was The Girl from the Sea by Molly Knox Ostertag. This was really cool because not only is it a graphic novel, it also had an audiobook, which read out the dialogue, but also added sound effects like text messaging alerts and like water sounds and like just ambient stuff. We follow Morgan. She's 15 years old and she's living on this small island. She is secretly a lesbian, but because her parents just divorced, and her brother is starting to act out and get in trouble in school, she doesn't really want to tell anyone. She wants to go with the flow, not upset anybody, and just stay in the closet. And the book opens up with her going down by the water, and unfortunately she slips and hits her head and falls in the water. And we think she's going to maybe drown, but then she is saved by a Selkie. I didn't really know what Selkies were before this, but they're sort of a mermaid-type lore, except they're seals who can turn into humans if they kiss. And overwhelmed by being saved and also being convinced that this was a dream, she and Kelty, the Selkie, kiss, which turns Kelty into a human. They're definitely attracted to one another, but when her friends come up and see her hanging out with Kelty, she immediately pretends she doesn't really know her and that she's just kind of this annoying clinger that she just kind of met recently. And she really downplays her relationship. She's really scared of being caught out, and even from her friends. Kelty says that Morgan is really the true shapeshifter because she acts one way in secret with Kelty and very different when she's around other people. It's hinted at that Kelty has like an ulterior motive for befriending Morgan. And you see her talking to Seals and saying, yeah, I'll get to it. So she has some sort of secret mission that we don't know about. I don't want to give away the rest because this is not very long, but I really enjoyed the characters. I just thought this story was super cute and super fun, and I loved the audiobook edition with it. I gave it 4 stars and would highly recommend. Moving to fiction. I'm going to say something controversial. Please don't hate me. But I did not like this book. I really did not like this book. And I will tell you why. I don't really read a lot of YA because I feel like I've aged out of that. It takes a really amazing book to appeal to all ages. And I thought that this was going to be one that did. It has very, very high ratings, over 4 point something on Goodreads. But unfortunately, it had many tropes that I really don't like. Once you're starting to like not enjoy something, things that maybe would have been not that irritating become more irritating when they kind of pile up. This book is about Yadriel. He is a trans boy. He desperately wants to prove to his community that he's a brujo. There's not a ton of acceptance for him being a trans boy. They very much still treat him like a girl. So when his cousin goes missing, all the men go to form a search party, and Yadriel wants to help. But his father says, no, you stay with the women. He decides to perform the brujo ceremony to try to raise the ghost and then figure out what happened to his cousin. However, he does not bring back his cousin. He brings back another boy who has recently died called Julian. Julian is really surprised he's dead. He doesn't know what happened. He is confused and baffled by the whole thing. But once he realizes that he is dead, he says something like, "Oh, my brother's gonna kill me." And Maritza, who is Yadriel's best friend and helping in this ceremony, is like, I think somebody already beat him to it. And I did like Maritza. She was really sassy and fun. She's also a vegan and refuses to practice as a bruja because it requires animal blood. So Julian, when he finds out that he has died, wants Yadriel to go check on his friends because he was with his friends when he died and he wants to make sure they're okay. This is where it started getting annoying to me because he wants to find out that his friends are okay before he moves on to the next world. But first he has to wait till Yadriel takes a math test. And then they have to sneak out because they're grounded and not allowed to be out past a certain hour. And some of those blocks just felt contrived, so I didn't like that. However, this book takes place over about 3 or 4 days, and within that amount of time, it's just insta-love. He loves Julian and is instantly enamored with him. Yadriel has to do something very risky for Julian, but he does because love. Additionally, the mystery of what happened to Julian and the missing cousin, I remember reading on a certain page and saying, okay, I'm going to predict what I think is going on. And I got it right. It was very predictable. Felt like the villain was very one-dimensional. And I even figured out their motivation. One of the reason the brujos and the brujas exist is they help souls move on to the next world. And when the ghosts hang around, they have a chance to go evil, basically, malevolent spirit. So it's very important that they don't stick around for too long. So Julian, after they check in with his friends, is like, all right, I'm ready. send me on to the next world and I'm good. Yadriel's like, no, I don't want to. Let's just, you hang out one more day. Yadriel just was completely illogical and very much thinking too much with like emotions rather than like, okay, this is what makes sense to do. It was predictable. It was insta-lovey. The characters made some really bad, illogical decisions. And it also felt like it got tied up way too neatly. It seemed really unrealistic. I enjoyed learning about the folklore of Day of the Dead and some of the rituals that they did, but the rest of it was just, I probably should have DNF'd it, but I kept thinking there's got to be something great about this. I didn't absolutely hate it, so I'm giving it 2 stars, but really it was not for me. Next, I picked up I Keep the Exoskeletons to Myself by Marissa Crane. This is a new release of a dystopian world. Criminals are no longer imprisoned. They get extra shadows for their crimes. These people who have extra shadows are called shadesters, and they have really limited ability to function in society. They are restricted on what they're allowed to buy. They have to pay extra taxes for their shadows, kind of like a criminal tax. They're ostracized and harassed, and when they mysteriously show up murdered, police really look the other way and feel like their life isn't worth investigating because they were basically this low-tier society member. We follow Chris, a woman whose wife dies giving birth to their child, and the child is given an extra shadow basically upon birth. Because she killed the birth mom. Obviously, there needs to be intent when we talk about punishing crime, and so that really didn't make a lot of sense. But she really tries to struggle how to raise this child with an extra shadow without the love of her life. This is mostly about grief and moving through society when you're considered less valuable than others. There doesn't seem to be any kind of trial, though. As soon as someone is arrested for a crime, they're pretty much taken right away to like a shame ceremony where they get an additional shadow. And because of this, there's a lot of corruption, and it's really clear that some of these people, the shadesters, are not really bad people. One of them is a political prisoner, essentially. She opposes the shadow program, and then she gets a shadow for opposing it. So some of the shadesters are really not bad people, but the way they accept everybody, and it seems weird. The world wasn't really well developed. We know that Chris has cameras placed in her house where the government can basically keep tabs on her, and we're led to believe that's because she's a shadester. But then her mother-in-law also has cameras in her house, and there's no indication that she has any extra shadows. So the world really wasn't explained very well, and it was kind of a mess. She also, because of the title, whenever she gets in a stress situation, Chris will just chant creatures that have exoskeletons. And that somehow soothes her, I guess. It got really repetitive and boring. The pacing in the story also felt really strange. We would be watching her struggle to raise this child and to live in this society where they're considered second-class citizens. But then she would have flashbacks to like sex with her wife, which felt strange. I feel like this had a lot of potential and could have been really poignant and powerful, talking about how our society views criminals and is there any chance for redemption. But it was just really disorganized and quite a mess. I did enjoy reading it whilst I was in it, which is why I gave it 3 stars. I don't think it's going to stick with me. I picked up The Paying Guest by Sarah Waters. This is my 3rd Sarah Waters, and it was my least favorite of the 3 I've read so far. I buddy read this with Jennifer over at Jennifer Loves Books. I will link her in the cards and in the description below. I had a great time reading this with Jennifer, though. So this is set just after World War I, and we are following Frances, a 27-year-old spinster, and her widowed mother. They have this nice grand house, but due to the war, they don't have the money to upkeep it. So they decide to take in lodgers. And so Leonard and Lillian this young married couple move in. I love Sarah Waters' writing. I think it's so beautiful and descriptive. Frances was aware of the couple overhead, like a speck in the corner of her eye. I just thought that was really cool. Frances quickly becomes very enamored with Lillian. They become quite close. After a night of drinking and sharing personal stories with one another, they start to flirt and they almost have a kiss. The moment seemed lost, the merest glimmer of a slender lure on a cast-out line that could never be reeled in. Another beautiful line I really liked described Frances after she was crying, and it says, "But the bout of sobbing had left her feeling bruised, wrung out, swollen, and dirty in the face." Gorgeous, gorgeous writing. So Frances and Lillian become an item, and they start having an affair right under the husband's nose. Then something happens that tests their relationship. That is where the book lost me. The last third, I would say, felt really slow and plotting, and I felt like there was less intrigue and tension than in the beginning of the book. So I gave this 3.5 stars. I still enjoyed it. I still think Sarah Waters is a brilliant writer, but this one just wasn't my favorite. Because I was participating in the Queer Lit Readathon, I decided to pick up the book Finna by Nino Cipri. This was the group read for the readathon, and I am glad because I had never heard of it before. This is a sci-fi novella set in what's kind of meant to be like an IKEA. They call it Littenvarld. We focus on Ava. She has just broken up with Jules, and they both work at the store. She does her best to kind of swap around her schedule so that she doesn't have to work with Jules, but unfortunately gets called in when someone is sick. They're, just hanging out, being awkward, when a woman comes up and asks if they can help her find her missing grandmother. So Jules and Ava walk around the store looking for this missing granny and stumble across a wormhole. So they go to tell the manager, and she decides to put on like this old tape, and it says, "We're here to tell you what to do if a wormhole shows up on your shift." I thought that was really funny. In the tape, they talk about how they used to have a department for dealing with wormholes specifically, but due to budget cuts, now it's up to each individual store. Ava does not want to do this, but is pretty much told she'll be fired if she doesn't do it. So she and Jules take a finna, which is supposed to help them find the granny in the parallel worlds, and they go through a wormhole. There were so many surprises about what was going on in the parallel worlds, and because this is so short, I'm not going to tell you anything more, but I did want to read a quote. I am slightly modifying the quote so that I don't spoil anything. Someone says to Ava, "Now the way I see it, there are infinite universes where X happens, and infinite universes where X didn't happen. Similarly, there are worlds where you are too much of a coward to find out, and worlds where you are brave enough. So it's up to you. Which of those worlds do we exist in now?" I thought this was really fun and imaginative and quite plucky. And I found out there's a companion story, and I will probably pick that up too. I gave this 4 stars. I picked up Rubyfruit Jungle by Rita Mae Brown. This is a classic lesbian coming-of-age story. This was written in the 1970s, and it has been challenged and banned quite a lot, and I understand why now. This was very, very sexually progressive. We follow Molly Bolt. The opening scene, she and her friend Broccoli are hatching a scheme to get money if he shows off his uncircumcised penis. So, very body scene to open with. Molly is headstrong. She sexually experiments with boys and girls, but admits she prefers girls, while other women who share her same sexual orientation are fine with experimenting with her. They ultimately bow to the pressure of getting married and having children. Molly does no such thing. She decides she is going to go off to New York City and become a film student. She wants to be a director that makes films. That's quite difficult because there's quite a bit of sexism, and it's very much a man's industry during this time. So she faces quite a few challenges. This had a lot of racism, homophobia, ableism, and lots of sexism. At one point, she is experimenting with a girl she is roommates with. And when people find out, they commit her to a mental institution. I thought it was a really interesting scene. After she left, she decides to hitch a ride to go to New York. And it says, I slung myself into the low Corvette and prayed he wasn't recently released from a mental institution. Maybe he should have been praying. I was just the one out of protective custody. I liked that bit of irony where she might have been the dangerous one. This was not always a comfortable read. It pushes the boundaries quite a lot with sex, so if that's not something you enjoy, I probably wouldn't recommend it for you. But I am really glad I read this, and I'm really glad that this representation existed back in the 70s. I read Strong Female Character by Fern Brady. This is her memoir growing up, and she finds out when she is in her 30s that she is autistic. And so she really looks back at her childhood and her memories and tries to see basically how that explains and how that label can help. She's both funny and genuine when she talks about her life. I've written down a couple of quotes because I just thought they were great. At one point, she's having a threesome with a couple, and then afterwards, they offer her Spam, like the canned meat. And she says, I already knew Mom would hate me for this, but the thought of her finding out I was eating processed food on top of everything else didn't bear thinking about, which I just thought was really funny. Another quote I liked was, when we arrived, there were probably 4 of us there, them smoking weed and drinking, talking about their adult jobs, and me occasionally trying and failing to think of a cool thing to say about books, which I related to. I bet quite a few of you will probably relate. And then she faces a lot of challenges. The book kind of goes back and forth between being funny and being serious. But her boyfriend said something that I thought was really poignant. And he said, it's very painful to start loving someone when holding on to the idea of hating them keeps you safe. I thought the book was great. I had heard it compared to 10 Steps to Nanette by Hannah Gadsby. They are both women comedians with autism and strong accents. So, yeah, they are similar. I do think I preferred 10 Steps to Nanette, but I thought this was really good. And if you liked that one, you might like this one as well. I ended up giving it 4 stars. So we are switching to a category that I have not added before now, and that is plays. I read The Laramie Project by Moises Kaufman and absolutely loved this. I was just sobbing buckets full of this. Let me tell you what it's about. This is a play that is based on interviews that the play members conducted shortly after Matthew Shepard, a 21-year-old college student, was murdered for being gay in Laramie, Wyoming. This was in 1998. Matthew Shepard was at a bar when 2 men picked him up. They beat him. They tied him to a post and they beat him some more. He was out in the elements for over 18 hours before he was found, and the cops and the ambulance were called. He was basically in a coma for a few days and then died. The 2 assailants used the gay panic as their defense in court, saying that Matthew had hit on them and that they were responding because they were not homosexual. This play is based on interviews from townspeople, hospital personnel, police officers, and court statements. A lot of the townspeople say that their ideology is to live and let live, and that they're fine with gay people as long as it doesn't affect their life. Some of them went so far as to say they're fine with it as long as they don't know about it. One of the perpetrator's fathers said, and I quote, "Had this been a heterosexual these boys decided to take out and rob, this would never have made the national news. Now my son is guilty before he's even had a trial." That baffled me, that his son is a murderer and he's upset because it was a hate crime. Murdoch Cooper, a local townsperson, said, "It doesn't bother anybody because most of them are gay or lesbian. They damn well know who to talk to. If you step out of line, you're asking for it. Some people are saying he made a pass at them. You don't pick up regular people. I'm not excusing their actions, but it did make me feel better that it was partially Matthew Shepard's fault and partially the guys who did it. You know, maybe 50-50. That was one of the lines that made me break down because this was 25 years ago, 1998. It was not that long ago. And these anti-LGBT views are becoming more and more prevalent now. We are taking steps backward for our society. This was just heartbreaking to read. There are some really great people that learned and became more accepting and more tolerant. This is quite short, but it was super impactful and I highly recommend it. I also watched the movie adaptation because that was my bingo prompt, and the movie is also amazing. It is on YouTube, and I will link it in case you would like to watch it. Okay, so those are the 10 books I read this month. Some great, some not so great. Tell me, how did your June go? Did you have any new favorites? Let's have a chat down in the comments below.